The American nation cannot, must not, and will not permit the establishment of another communist government.
This is called a Cavendish banana. It's the most common banana on earth. It's probably the one that you have in your kitchen right now. It's definitely the one you see in the grocery store. This banana was created in a fancy looking house in England. Yes, created, and yes, in England. Kind of weird. Bananas aren't from England. They're originally from Asia. And there are thousands of different kinds of bananas. So how did this banana, the Cavendish, that was created in England, become the banana that you eat today? Well, the answer to that is not so simple. You have to understand the story of bananas, which, yes, is something we're diving into today. It's a story filled with predatory corporations and geopolitics and American imperialism and disease and really some amazing marketing. It explains how corporations can grow so big that they begin to act like governments, like dictators. And it explains why this banana, the Cavendish, the one you know and love, might not exist soon.
The world's most popular banana may be on the verge of extinction.
Oh, and while I was diving deep into this, I discovered that there's a better tasting banana out there. One that isn't supposed to exist anymore, but I got my hands on some. And yes, they're better. So, buckle up. This is the effed up history of bananas. We're pausing this story really quick because I just need to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is stamps.com, a service that I have used for now several years, long before they came to sponsor a video, so it's kind of cool. A few years ago, I became independent, which meant I had to start running my own business. I quickly realized that running a business means shipping things a lot. I was shipping hard drives with footage, I was shipping gear and lenses. I was going to the post office a bunch, which is kind of my nightmare. So I Googled, like, what's the best way to not go to the post office, and stamps.com came up. Stamps.com is all of the things that the post office does, but in your office or house. I can ship packages and letters for less cost from the comfort of this studio. In fact, right behind me is my whole like stamps.com setup. Got a fancy scale, so I literally put the package on this scale. It tells me how much it is, it plugs into my computer, and I type in the address of where I'm sending it, and it spits out a shipping label that I then print with my label printer, and I put it on the package, and then I put it at my front door, and it gets taken away by the mail person. Like, it's the easiest thing in the world, and I'm very grateful that I discovered it. Stamps.com is saving lots of businesses time and money. It has certainly saved me a lot of time and money, which is why I'm really grateful that they're supporting this channel and sponsoring today's video. You can get 4 weeks of this for free if you want to just try it out. There's a link in my description, stamps.com/JohnnyHarris. If you sign up, you'll get this free trial plus some free postage and a digital scale. You'll get one of those scales, which is incredibly helpful. There's no long-term commitment or contracts. Just go to stamps.com/JohnnyHarris to start your trial, get a free scale and some postage, and never have to go to the post office again. Okay, so bananas are from Southeast Asia, but like 400 years ago, Europeans were taking over the world, and the Portuguese brought bananas over to the Americas. A few hundred years later, an American sailor was in Jamaica, and he found this funny-looking exotic yellow fruit, and money started flashing in his eyes. He started selling bananas to Americans, who quickly loved this new fruit. Bananas were trending, people were talking about it. So then fast forward to nearly the end of the 1800s, and you have the World's Fair, where all the people show up and show off their new technology. At the fair, you've got this guy, Alexander Graham Bell, who's showing up with his cute little new invention that's about to change the world. But another crowd favorite at the expo was the banana. Yes, bananas were equally as impressive as the telephone at the World's Fair. The banana business started booming in the United States, much of these bananas flowing in from New York City. The port there was dubbed Banana Docks for a while because of so much fruit import. So now you have all these Americans eating this sweet, creamy, delicious fruit and throwing the slippery peels onto the street. It got so bad that the police commissioner at the time, oh God, I can't get away from this guy, Teddy Roosevelt. Once again, I swear, I get into any story, I like start to research it and it's like, yeah, and then there's American imperialism and it's like Teddy Roosevelt like shows up. Anyway, so Teddy Roosevelt, the police commissioner, starts putting a fine on people for throwing their banana peels on the sidewalk. Like, this isn't just like a silly fake joke. It's like, this is a real thing. People slipped on banana peels.
Patrick, banana peel, don't!
What did you say?
And you could go to jail for it. I mean, look at this. There's this New York Times article documenting Teddy Roosevelt, the police commissioner, speaking to a room of police captains, explaining, quote, the bad habits of banana skins, and dwelling particularly on its tendency to toss people into the air and bring them down with terrific force on the hard pavement. This was a real issue. Okay. Banana docks, Teddy Roosevelt, slippery banana peels, silly newspaper articles from the late 1800s. This isn't the story here. We're just getting started. This is like Banana's like innocent phase.
Sí.
It's about to heat up. Let's see how Bananas turned from this to this. The banana business people in the US realized it was time to ramp up to meet all of this new demand. But instead of just importing more bananas from, say, Jamaica or other countries in the Caribbean, the banana companies realized that they needed to control the supply chain. Let me explain what I mean by a second by looking at this banana. Bananas are fragile. They're soft. They spoil in like a week. Like this one's like moments away from spoiling. Look at those spots. To get this thing from somewhere close to the equator all the way to New York City and then into someone's market and then into somebody's home, all without it being crushed and without it spoiling, is a fragile, quick, expensive process. And the only way to do it profitably is to do a lot of it. A lot of bananas. And the only way to do a lot of bananas is to control the supply chain. So it's like 1900 at this point. There's a banana gold rush happening. There's a bunch of companies trying to figure out how to control the supply chain. And then they decide to sort of merge together and become this one super company called the United Fruit Company. And their plan for combining was to control everything, control the supply chain. They turned their attention completely to Central America, where they know bananas could grow abundantly and where, oh, look at this, the US is thinking about making a little canal that cuts through this little narrow strip of land. So the United Fruit Company is like, that's kind of a nice perk for the region. If anything goes wrong, the US could have our backs. Foreshadowing. Am I foreshadowing? I'm foreshadowing. So yeah, United Fruit Company's like, this region, Central America, looks like a great neighborhood to control the supply chain. They wanted to control the people who worked on the farm by owning their basic survival needs. They wanted to control the houses they lived in and the stores they shopped in and what they could buy. They wanted to control the transportation by building railways so that they could quickly ship their product onto ports. They wanted to control the boats and the waterways so that they could get all of these bananas from Central America to the US before they spoiled. They started with Guatemala, pouring tons of investment into controlling every inch of their supply chain. Soon, they were the largest company in Guatemala. They owned a fifth of the farmable land in the country. They owned all of the railways and all of the radio stations and radio infrastructure. And by 1901, the government of Guatemala actually hired the United Fruit Company to manage the country's postal service. What? United Fruit was starting to look a lot like a government, and the result was a lot of happy banana-eating Americans. So they kept going. They kept expanding their operations across Central America. So now with all of this beautiful infrastructure and trains and land, the next strategy for making bananas even more profitable was, you guessed it, paying the workers next to nothing. Oh, and paying them not with real money. A lot of the times, United Fruit paid their workers in vouchers. These vouchers could only be used in designated United Fruit commissaries. So they're not actually making real money here. So wait, now the United Fruit Company has its own currency? Oh, and they also had like a private navy. 93 boats called the Great White Fleet. But then eventually they started using these boats to like transport people on cruises. These boats were even used during World War II. United Fruit started to look like a literal government. They had their hands in everything, so much so that they earned theirself the nickname El Pulpo, which means the octopus in Spanish, meaning they had their tentacles in everything all over Central America. The land, the crops, the people, the infrastructure, and soon enough, government agencies. Soon these countries became so dominated by and reliant on the United Fruit Company that they were no longer run by the people or the governments. They were run by American banana companies who had all the power and leverage in the world. This led to the nickname Banana Republic, which is a politically unstable country whose society is exploited for profit for one single product, in this case, bananas. Yeah, and probably not the best sort of thing to name your clothing store after. Like, just a thought, but like, who made that decision? United Fruit and other banana companies continued to grow and control Central America. Eventually, people got tired of this. In 1911, Honduras was like, all right, we're done, banana companies, like, we're gonna take back our land, we can take it from here, these are our plantations, you've gone too far. Banana companies didn't like this. So they organized a private army to help overthrow the government so that they could put in a president that they liked, who would allow them to keep doing exactly what they were doing and also give them a tax break. So yeah, banana companies are now overthrowing governments. Jeez. This kept happening. Anytime there was political dissent or the governments of these countries started to like step up and say like no, the banana companies would intervene. And guess who had their back? The US military. And yes, we're back to Teddy Roosevelt's. Teddy Roosevelt. What a guy. Here's Teddy stomping around the Caribbean with his big stick, making sure that American military and business interests are protected. In Honduras alone, the US invaded 7 times in the early 1900s, all in the name of protecting these banana companies and other US interests from having to face these pesky locals who were so audacious as to want to run their own country. How dare they? You have to remember that at this time, the US was starting to get really comfortable with empire behavior, and Central America was at the top of the priority list. The banana companies knew this, which allowed them to feel emboldened to just sort of do whatever they wanted in the region. Okay, but this is sort of child's play. It started to get a lot worse in the 1920s. There was a situation in Colombia where a bunch of workers for the United Fruit Company decided to stop working and protest their working conditions. They were asking for a few things like, I don't know, working 6 days a week instead of 7, or getting paid real money. The United Fruit Company refuses to negotiate with them and instead goes to the US and says, hey USA, we've got these really annoying workers who are like trying to unionize and trying to get paid and stuff, and it actually smells a lot like communism. And the US is like, wait, what, communism? Tell me more. So then the US threatens to invade with